Okay, so this is part 2 of my discussion and assessment of Daniel Martell's mother, Janie. And I will say the same thing that I said yesterday, and that is that she is not their step-grandmother. And it really bugs me that the media have gone with that title. As far as I am concerned, she is the mother of the former boyfriend of the mother of these children, meaning that she has very little connection to them. And from my research, it does appear that she actually did have very little to do with these children. Keep an eye out for that. I will cover that soon. I just need to find the particular audio to go with what I have discovered. I did notice that those of you who made comments on yesterday's video did seem to share the same opinion as me in terms of her motivation, her connection to the children, the validity of her story. So I feel a bit more confident in this second part to be a little bit more frank with my opinions. And to be perfectly frank, I'm going to say this, that this is somebody who I would not want to be anywhere near. This also provides me a much clearer understanding of why Malaya left the property when she did. Now, prior to this interview coming out, I had obtained an audio recording of Janie sharing her side of the story, which was somewhat less PG than this version. And originally I had been debating whether or not to share it on my channel because, as you know, I don't buy into the whole Days of Our Lives side of this case. However, because she is someone who was on the property when the children went missing, because she has that direct link with them going missing, and because her identity is verified, I am actually going to go through that audio with you in a series of videos. I wouldn't say it would be one video because altogether it's about 40 minutes worth of audio. But I actually think, having seen this particular interview, that it's important that we do have a look at this other audio and see the side of Janie that isn't really a put on for public viewing. I do feel also, based on what I've listened to, that her key motivation for coming out in public is, firstly, to protect Daniel, to basically create a narrative that makes Daniel appear to be like a bit of a hero, to make him appear to be guilt-free, and I believe the other motive for her coming out in public is to discredit Malaya. You don't see it quite so much in this video, but like I said, I will go through the additional audio that I have and you will see exactly what I mean by that. Now, I believe this second part of this interview is actually quite important. I believe there is one instance when she slips up and lets out a significant truth, and I also believe that in this part of the interview she shows us exactly her motivation for coming out and talking. And I also believe that there is one part of this interview where she is essentially trying to defend Daniel, but in fact it actually makes it look like she's acknowledging his guilt. Anyway, you will see what I'm talking about as we get through this video. So let's just jump in and have a look. And yes, for anyone who is new to my channel, I have a chihuahua who snores very, very loudly.
We've heard a lot about the patio door.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's go see that.
Sure.
So this is the patio door.
This is the patio door
that Jack and Lily would have.
that Jack and Lily came out of.
Okay. And so tell us why we've heard about the patio door.
Because everybody's saying on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok that the patio door makes a noise. And why they didn't hear the door open. The bedroom is back there, okay?
That far window.
The
there.
last window is the bedroom.
And so they would have come out this door.
They would have come out this
that
door.
morning.
Yes.
And then they went and played on the swing set.
Yes,
And that's when you heard them.
that's when I heard them.
Okay, well, that one segment there straight out puts Dimwit's story to bed well and truly. Because by turning around and showing this on this interview, she is basically confirming that that is the story they are going with, the story of the children getting out this door and nobody hearing them getting out the door. So if Dingbat's story about her catching Malaya after Malaya doing a handoff of the kids, putting them in a car, had even a modicum of truth behind it, then she wouldn't be, at this point in time, pointing out the fact that, see, the door is silent, so their stories are correct. Now, yes, the bedroom is some distance from that door, so maybe they wouldn't actually hear the door opening. And if the children didn't shut it properly or didn't shut it, they may not hear it shut. But we heard in yesterday's video from Janie that according to her, the kids are not quiet. So even had they not heard that door open and close, logically they would have heard them outside. They would have known they were outside the moment they stepped foot outside that door, because according to Janie, they are very, very loud. Even if they didn't initially hear them, maybe they were quiet when they went out that door and they went up the yard a bit before they started making noise. Well, according to Janie, they were on the swing and they were being very noisy on the swing. So this whole story of they snuck outside, we had no idea, is clearly a load of BS. And without realising it, in this interview she has proven that. And of course she's also proven that Dingbat was telling a whole load of hogwash. Now, I'm not prepared to fully accept the story that they didn't hear the door regardless, because it's not completely quiet for starters. And the thing is that there is this sixth sense that mothers have. When you're a mother, your hearing becomes super, super acute. And we know that, from what Belinda said, that Malaya did actually care about those children and she was a good mother. Maybe things weren't quite right after she moved in with Daniel, but surely a mother who is super in tuned to that sort of thing would hear it. Maybe not. Maybe all these stories that are being pushed out by Daniel and his family are true. But I seriously doubt that. But like I said, the question of whether or not they could hear that door is kind of a moot point when you consider the fact that Janie has said, well, when the kids are outside, they're so damn noisy. Meaning that regardless of whether or not you could hear that door open and close, you would still know the children were outside because you would hear them. So Janie has shown here that this lie of the children went outside and we didn't know because the door's so quiet is a lie. Now, something a lot of people pointed out from yesterday's video was that they have been clearly been doing maintenance around that property, and when she walks up the stairs you can see that is quite clearly new timber in place to put a railing on where those steps are. Presumably Daniel has been told that, the property is not suitable for children and he will not be able to have access to any of his children on that property while it is still in such a condition. That said, I strongly suspect that when the RCMP concludes this investigation, that it could be a very long time before Daniel gets to spend time with his children anyway.
Right here in this area here. I plan on putting a pool up this year for the kids. You need level ground for a pool. That's what I was doing. I was leveling out the ground to set up a pool.
I'm really not convinced by that story. First of all, when I look at that spot, it looks like it's been pretty well levelled anyway. And if you're setting up a pool, you're really only looking at an area of around about, 3 metres squared if you want to set up a pool that's one that you put up and pull back down again. But at the end of the day, let's be realistic too. Yeah, sure, Daniel's got older children, but they don't live there. So was she planning on putting in a pool way out in the open where you couldn't fence it off to prevent children from getting access to it at any time in the day? Meaning there would have been a high risk of those children drowning in that pool. And as for the location of it, sure, that part of the driveway is level, so logically that's where you would put a pool if you were going to do so. Even though it would be so unsafe. Like I said, you've got a 18-month-old child, a 4-year-old child and a 6-year-old child, none of whom could probably swim, I would presume, given where they were living. And you want to put in a pool so they can just climb in unsupervised. Because in another discussion, she talks about those children always being outside unsupervised. Would you really think it would be a good idea if those children were supposedly outside unsupervised all the time to put a pool in? But not only that, the location isn't even at the top of that driveway there. It's quite some distance from the gate to get through. So why make it so far away? Also, why do so in the first place, given that you complain about how much noise they make when they're on the swings outside your RV? Because I can assure you that children that age, if they're loud on swings, they're certainly going to be loud in a pool. In fact, they're probably going to be louder because playtime in water is so exciting for little kids. And let's say that she did have to level it out a little bit to put a pool there. Well, logically, that's not how you do it. If you have a flat area of ground and you want to put a pool in for your children, then you are going to need to bring in a load of sand or some thick rubber matting to go underneath, because the rocks on that sort of gravelly, hard clay are going to work their way through that pool, and then within the first couple of months, there's going to be holes everywhere and you'll be throwing that pool out before the end of the summer. But like I said, what person in their right mind would set up a pool in an area that is not fenced with child-proof gates and child-proof fencing? You don't need much water for a child to drown. It really doesn't have to be all that deep at all. A child can drown in a wading pool.
And this is the Thursday.
This is Thursday.
Right.
Friday, all the investigators, search and rescue and everything, right around here was where they found the only footprint.
This is where the boot.
This is where I was raking that night. That's where the boot print was found, in the mud where I was raking.
Okay, so apparently this is an important part of the narrative, that they found this boot print in the exact location where she was raking the night before. And I want to unpack that a little bit because I do think that is important, particularly given what she says next with regards to the boot print on the pipeline. So she points out that that is the only footprint that they found. She says footprint instead of boot print. I'm not sure if that's either here nor there, but just something worthy of note. Now, when she is sharing this information, she is leaning forward about as far as she possibly can. Not only is she leaning forward, but she's also jutting her chin forward and staring directly at the news reporter. This bit of information, she is doing her best to make sure that this news reporter believes her. Her body language says that to her it is really, really important that this is believed. She's also emphasising the fact that she had raked the mud the night before, meaning that the only way that footprint or boot print could have possibly got there was when the children were out that morning, just as they were going missing. Of course, there's so many problems with this. Let me start with, first of all, earlier in this interview, she established the fact that they couldn't possibly have gotten out the gate onto that driveway because she would have heard them. So she was positive that they did not go through that gate and out onto that driveway. And yet now she is presenting a boot print and saying, you have to believe me on this. This could have only occurred when they went missing because I raked this driveway the night before, meaning that it was not there the night before. Now, if she herself believed that this boot print was legitimate, then why would she be saying there's no way they came out through this gate here because I would have heard them? Because the boot print would basically prove that to be wrong. Which to me says that right here she is spinning a narrative. This to me says that somebody put that boot print there and that it was not put there by a child. Now, let's talk about in the mud. Well, children have very, very short strides. If there was one boot print in the mud, there should have been several, not just one. Or was there just one itty-bitty patch of mud, just the right size for a boot print to fit into? Because the other problem with that is that it didn't rain till the evening after the children went missing. It hadn't rained for a while up until when the children went missing. I'm not sure where I've put the chart that I had, but I do recall covering this in a previous video. There had been almost no rain whatsoever through April. It had been quite dry. Correct me if I'm wrong if you are a local, as I am currently going from memory. Like I said, I can't find where I put the chart, so that is me going from memory. But it had not rained in the days leading up to these children going missing. And she claims that she had raked it over to level it over. Well, then why was there still mud there? Because if you had raked that spot over to level it over, there would be fresh gravel there, which means that the mud would basically be covered, and you don't get boot prints in gravel. And of course, to be able to get a muddy patch on that driveway, then you would need an indentation for the water to pool to create the mud, because otherwise it would have dried out by then. So this story really does not hold water at all. The other thing that concerns me with this narrative, particularly because this is not the only instance when a comment made by her seems to point more towards something happening to the children the night before. Because having mentioned about raking the driveway, she then skips forward to talking about the Friday when the RCMP came. So at that point in time, the part of the narrative is the Friday. But then she goes back to referring to that night. She says, where I was raking that night. Putting it that way, by referring to it as that night, implies that there was something that occurred that night. Not the night before they went missing, but that night. By referring to it as that night, she's adding significance to the night before the children went missing. That night implies something significant occurred that night when she was raking. Like I said, this is one of 3 instances that I've spotted so far where she seems to be pointing towards the fact that something may have happened to these children the night before they were reported missing. Not only that, but these things that she is saying here in this interview implicate her in at the very least, covering up for what happened. She has given a number of absolutes in this interview, but the problem is these absolutes cancel each other out. These children absolutely did not go through that gate where her RV was, because she would have heard them. And yet these children absolutely walked over the area where she had been raking that night, the night before, because the boot print was fresh, because she knows it couldn't have happened the night before because she raked that area, meaning that had it been there, it would have been raked over. Those two absolutes cannot exist together. Likewise, she absolutely knows that they could not have wandered off into the woods, because she would have heard them had they gone up into their little fort. Another absolute. And yet she went searching in the woods for them. The other absolute there is that Jack couldn't navigate through the woods on his own without an adult to help him. And yet she went searching in the woods for him. The absolutes that she is giving here in this interview don't match. They cannot exist concurrently.
I thought there was two boot prints.
There was supposed to be a footprint found away up on the pipeline.
Right.
Malaya sent me the picture of it. That's all I know. There was a footprint found.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, the footprint was here. The only one that they can confirm that was Lily and Jack's was right here.
So it was child size.
Yes, a man, one of the investigators came in here and was measuring it all.
Okay. I would have to say that this woman is the weakest link. I think that investigators, if they really want to speed this investigation up, should be talking to her some more, because she's really not good at lying. She's not good at giving narratives. Now, she's mentioned this boot print, and then she says there was supposed to be a footprint found up on the pipeline. Now, maybe it is just her language saying supposed to be as opposed to there was. Or maybe it is a bit of a guilty admission there. Bit of a leaked truth. We did a footprint here. We did another one up on the pipeline that they were supposed to find. The problem with the one on the pipeline is that it wasn't found till after the rain, so they couldn't confirm that it belonged to either of the children because it was slightly eroded from the rain. So is this supposed to be a footprint found in reference to the fact that it could not be confirmed because it wasn't found till after the rain? And note that she says Malaya sent her a photo of the one that was found up on the pipeline. Well, that's really interesting for several reasons. The other audio that I have, she spends most of that audio going out of her way to discredit Malaya and making it extremely clear that she really, really does not like Malaya. So Malaya sending her anything, for me, I've got to question that. But aside from that, Malaya didn't go out searching, for starters. So why would she have a photo with that boot print in the first place? It's not standard protocol for investigators to share evidence with the family. They wouldn't need confirmation that the boot print was the right tread because they had a description of the boots. All they had to do was actually check the tread pattern on boots that were identical to those boots that were described as being what Jack and Lily were wearing. Now, the other thing that is a huge red flag to me is that when she's referring to this boot print, she refers to it as being the only one that they found that was Lily and Jack's. Why is this significant? Because she's not referring to one child in particular. She's referring to Lily and Jack. In other words, this one boot print connects with the disappearance of Lily and Jack. Not this boot print belongs to Jack or this boot print belongs to Lily. Meaning that here it's about the narrative. It's not about saying we know that Jack walked here because they found a boot print that matches his size. Being very general, referring to it as a boot print connected with Lily and Jack, makes it appear to me that it is basically a setup. That boot print was actually made by an adult to try and steer investigators in a particular direction. Her referring to it in terms of Lily and Jack, not giving the specifics of whose it could have been, it depersonalises it. It makes it sound like it is part of the story of the disappearance of Lily and Jack. Not a case of, well, they found Lily's boot print. It makes it sound like people have sat down together and went, okay, now what we can do is put a boot print that's going to look like it belongs to Lily or Jack, and that's going to steer investigators in that direction. By referring to it as Lily and Jack, it sounds like it is something that has been discussed, something that has been created as part of a narrative. So when you couple it with that, her saying that there was supposed to be a footprint found on the pipeline definitely sounds like that was a slip-up when she says supposed to be. The plan was, we'd put a boot print here, we'd put a boot print there. They were both supposed to be found. And like I said, these are both little kids with very short strides. So in each location, there should have been more than a boot print found, even a partial print, because they're not going to have a big long stride like a person.
I'm not here to lie. The reason why I wanted you guys to come here and do the interview here is to show you exactly where everything took place.
Now, the moment someone comes out and says, I'm not here to lie, that's when you need to pay attention. Because generally, if someone is telling the truth, they don't have to tell you that they are telling the truth. They don't have to tell you that they are not lying. If you're telling the truth, you don't become defensive about it. You don't turn around and say, partway through telling a story, honestly, I'm not lying to you. It is a classic thing that you hear from someone who is lying. And she follows through with, I'm doing this to show you exactly where everything took place. Well, that's well and good, but the thing is, the narrative that we were given from Daniel and Malaya is that they have no idea where everything took place. Because according to them, the children just vanished out the back door and that's all they know. But aside from that, you're referring to children going missing. That's not everything taking place. That is basically an event that occurred. Everything taking place, to me, refers to a bunch of other actions. Sure, she said, well, I heard them on the swing. But then all her other stories negate each other. But what she is making quite clear here is that she didn't get them in because she wants to make a plea for people to help find Lily and Jack. She got them in to basically share her narrative. And not only share her narrative, but show them all the places that exist in her narrative. She got them in to sell a story. That is all it is. And like I said, the story doesn't hold water because she gives far too many absolutes that cancel each other out. And the children going missing is one single event. That is not everything taking place. Everything taking place refers to a chain of events. Yeah, sure, you could say the chain of events is the children got out the door and they played on the swings and then they evaporated very, very silently. But that still is the event of the children going missing. Whether they went missing from the moment they walked out that door or whether they went missing from having been on the swings, they still went missing. It is not everything. Everything refers to a whole heap of things that occurred.
And to show people that this is what happened.
Honestly, that is such an aggressive stance and such aggressive language. I would have felt really uncomfortable if I was that interviewer, I have to say. And again, she's reiterating that she got them there to show people that this is what happened. She wants people to make sure that they understand this is the narrative that you have to believe. Well, really? What does it show us? It shows us that people have lied. She's showing all these areas, but the only area that can be really confirmed is that sliding door, if the children went out through that sliding door. I have my doubts. Really, all she is offering up here is her story of what she did and what she experienced on the morning that the children were reported missing. Very little of this interview has much to do with the children at all, aside from these contradicting claims that she is making.
All the stuff that people, all the rumors and accusations about us murdering the kids and burying them on the property, this place has been searched thoroughly. The well has been checked, the septic tank, all the barns were searched. My RV was searched 3 times. The trailer was searched. This whole place was searched. If they want to come back and search again, they're more than welcome.
Okay, I believe her that those children aren't on that property. She is pretty adamant about that. And what she is saying here when she is referring to the amount of searching that occurred and the fact that she's saying they're welcome to come and search again, that to me sounds like someone who is confident that those children are not on that property. But let's back up a bit to the beginning of what she said there. So this is telling us what she is really annoyed about. She's not concerned about the fact that the children are missing and that there's no news. Her concern, the reason she did this interview, is because of the rumours and accusations about them. She includes herself in this. The rumours and accusations about us unaliving the kids and burying them on the property. She's including herself here in the action. Now, I avoid a lot of the BS online, so I don't know if this is something that has been spoken about on other YouTube channels. I've not seen mention of it anywhere on the Facebook pages that I keep an eye on. But she is including herself here in the whole thing of the children going missing. She's making herself a part of it. This is not just about defending Daniel, this is about defending herself. Which again makes me wonder if she definitely was involved with covering things up after whatever happened. Note, what she doesn't say here is that they weren't responsible for the children not being alive. She mentions the rumours and the accusations, but she never once says that they are untrue. She does, however, like I said, when it comes to burying them on the property, she goes through all the areas that have been searched. She makes it pretty clear that the property has been so thoroughly searched, which of course should lead to the conclusion that the children are definitely not on that property. And she even says, if they want to come back and search again, they're more than welcome. She is super confident that that is not where the children are. And let's acknowledge the fact that she's clearly quite pissed about the fact that they checked her RV 3 times. That to me suggests that the investigators got the same kind of vibe of her that we are getting right now from this interview. But like I said, while on one hand what she's saying about all the places that have been searched on the property tends to demonstrate the fact that the children probably are not on the property, at the same time she very quickly brushes over the rumours and accusations about them being responsible for the kids not being alive. She does not once say that they are wrong. The only thing that she is solidly refuting here is the fact that the children aren't on the property.
You've talked about drones flying over your property. You've
Yes.
talked about cars driving down the road and
Yes.
slowing down. What's that been like?
I'm scared to go out sometimes in my own property. I mostly stay around back here. And if I do go out front for anything, I usually have my head down because I don't want people to see who I am. That is me myself. It's not because I'm hiding from anybody. I don't like to be on camera. I don't like my picture taken. I'm just a quiet person that just wants to be left alone, and I mind my own business. I'm just a hermit.
Okay, something important that we need to acknowledge here, and that is that there are people who do live a almost hermit-like existence. People who do struggle with going out into the world. People who even just going outside their front door can seem quite daunting. Maybe they go out and check their mail after dark so that they know they're not going to run into anyone. It's a real thing. And the sad part is that it's become worse. More people have become like that since 2020, when people were made to stay indoors and weren't allowed to interact with other people. And the people who were already kind of, leaning towards that sort of thing, it just made it even harder for them to come back out and interact with the world again when people were allowed to go out and mix, go out and go to the shops even. This is a woman who has lived on that property for quite some time, I gather. Sounds like she was living in that RV on her own. What I've heard is that Daniel's brother, his marriage broke up and he was staying with her for a while. So that was a short-term thing. And I would imagine that prior to when Malaya moved in with the children, then that would have been a pretty quiet spot. So, yes, maybe it is a cause of anxiety, suddenly having all these extra people driving along the road and looking up at your property. And maybe there is truth in what she's saying here, that she doesn't like interacting with strangers. She doesn't like being seen. But here's the problem. The moment she started interacting with people on Facebook and interacting with people on YouTube channels, she was bringing herself into the centre of attention. Not only that, she's claiming she doesn't like to be on camera, she doesn't like to have her picture taken. She wants to be this person in the background, and yet she's doing this interview. Before now, none of us knew what she looked like. And now she's basically come out and made sure that the whole world knows what she looks like. Which kind of tends to negate what she's saying about not wanting to be seen. She says she's a quiet person and she just wants to be left alone to mind her own business. But she hasn't been minding her own business. She's been all up through Facebook and YouTube, making sure that she shares a narrative that's going to basically try and clear Daniel's name. She says, I don't want people to see who I am. She's saying this on camera with mainstream media who are going to publish it on the internet so everyone can see who she is. But the significant thing she says in amongst all this is the denial. It's not because I'm hiding from anybody. If indeed what she's saying about being scared to go out the front, mostly staying around the back, and if she goes around the front she puts her head down, to me that sounds like someone who basically is wanting to avoid engaging with anyone. It's not so much a concern about being seen, but it's a concern about engaging with people. Like I said, this could be a genuine anxiety thing. Someone who has lived in an isolated rural area for a long time and not had to deal with many people at any one time, and that this may be confronting. But then why come forward so publicly? Why come out on social media and be so very vocal and very present if you don't want to be seen and you don't want to be noticed? I want to mention another case that I covered recently, and that is the case of Phoebe Bishop, who went missing in Queensland, Australia. Now, during the entire time that she was missing, we didn't hear a peep from her biological father. However, we had an explanation from her mother that basically they wanted to keep Phoebe's father's identity out of the public sphere because he has a 13-year-old daughter that they wanted to protect. They didn't want her being exposed publicly. They didn't want her to be dragged into this. They wanted to protect her privacy as a child, as a young teenager who was going through a lot of stuff. And you know what? The media respected that. Everyone who was in the various Facebook groups respected that. There weren't a lot of YouTube channels covering the case because it was an Australian case, so most people didn't even notice that it existed. But those of us who were covering it respected that also. Even in this case, quite early on, the media tried to contact Cindy Murray, and she basically said to them, look, we are not going to have any communication with media in this. We are choosing to stay silent. And pretty quickly the focus was moved away from her. The spotlight was never really put on her. Yes, recently you've had a lot of gaslighting from people in Daniel's camp, but in terms of people who are covering the case respectfully and dealing only in facts, people have just gone, okay, well, you know, we're not worried about Cindy Murray then because she doesn't want to be looked at here. Up until recently, that was exactly the same situation with Janie McKenzie. Most people didn't even know her name. Very few people would have known what she looked like unless they actually knew her personally. But she made the choice here to contact media and to get her face out there on this interview and to speak out. So it really makes me question her talking about being a private person and not wanting to be seen. So let's entertain the thought for a moment that her not going around the front, or trying to avoid going around the front, or keeping her head down when she is around the front, if that's not someone who struggles with anxiety over interacting with other people, then that is the actions of someone who perhaps feels a little guilty over something, does not want to interact with people because they don't want to answer questions that might be incriminating. If we take the issue of social anxiety off the table, then the situation appears more like someone who has a bit of guilt happening. Because if you had nothing to hide, if you didn't feel guilty, then you would just ignore the traffic going down the road. You would ignore the drones up in the sky. So it either is an anxiety issue, she doesn't want to be seen, she doesn't want people to know she exists, or there is some sort of guilt issue here and she doesn't want people confronting her over something. Like I said, if it was a privacy thing, it is a somewhat unusual act to then contact the media and do a on-camera interview.
Do you feel as if the finger has been pointed towards you and Daniel?
Yes, I do. Because I live on the property. Come on.
Do you think your son had anything to do with the disappearance of Jack and Lily?
No, I don't believe Daniel had anything to do with the disappearance of Jack and Lily.
Okay, so throughout this entire interview, everything she has said has been quite fluent. The cadence has remained the same. Until this question, do you think your son had anything to do with the disappearance of Jack and Lily? And straight away, you see her starting to shake her head as she is saying, no, I don't. And then you get a pause and she stutters on believe. This one sentence, she's having trouble getting it out. She's having trouble saying that she doesn't believe that Daniel had anything to do with the disappearance of Jack and Lily. I've said this in multiple videos, but I will say this for people who may be new to my channel. The brain does not like to lie. We're not programmed to lie. We're programmed to basically tell it as it is. So when a person is attempting to lie, the brain will sometimes sabotage that lie. And one of the ways that that occurs is that trying to say a sentence, trying to complete that sentence, becomes difficult. There may be instances where you accidentally substitute words, which is those instances where by accidentally inserting a word you show guilt. But a significant thing, particularly when you've just had this 8-minute interview where the cadence has remained pretty much the same, and then suddenly, when she's trying to say she doesn't believe Daniel had anything to do with it, that's when we see her struggling to actually get it out there. That's her brain trying to stop her from lying. And as she is saying it, that whole statement, she's shaking her head, saying that this is not truthful. Her speech and her body language is giving her away here. She's saying that Jack did have something to do with the disappearance of Jack and Lily, which of course at this point in time is blatantly obvious anyway to everybody with, a modicum of intelligence.
Our heart don't lie, and my heart is telling me that my kid did not have nothing to do with this, and I had nothing to do with this.
Oh wow, her breathing right there reached a point where she was almost hyperventilating. This is something that is extremely distressing to her. The topic of Daniel having anything to do with the disappearance of those children. Note 2. What she says here is, a heart don't lie, and my heart is telling me that my kid had nothing to do with this. Now, I just want to point out that this, on one hand, is paraphrasing the interview that Belinda Gray did when she said that her heart tells her that those children are no longer alive. But in this instance, this is not about Jack and Lily for this woman. This is about her son. This is about protecting her son. And she's saying that in her heart she believes, or she doesn't even say she believes. She's saying her heart tells her that her kid had nothing to do with this. Why am I emphasising her kid? Because she is not being specific here. This is the one instance in this whole interview when she has suddenly become incredibly distressed. The distress is over Daniel, not over Lily and Jack. And she is super distressed, she is shaking her head. And when she's saying, she's trying to make it sound like, well, my heart tells me this, so you've got to believe it. But where this falls flat is that she says, my heart is telling me that my kid had nothing to do with this. She can't go that extra step and say that her heart is telling her that Daniel had nothing to do with this. She can't be specific because her brain won't let her do that lie. Because saying it in terms of my heart is almost like saying, I promise you. And when you make a promise, you don't want to be lying when you promise. And you could say, okay, well, but the interviewer asked her if her son had anything to do with it. Well and good, except that she then carried through. She said, I don't believe Daniel had anything to do with it. And then when she is trying to emphasise it, trying to make it sound like she is so sincere that, you know, in her heart she knows this thing, making it sound like she is promising the interviewer here, that's when she cannot say Daniel's name. And like I said, at the same time, she is nearly hyperventilating and she is shaking her head. I am certain that this woman knows exactly what happened to Lily and Jack. I'm certain that she knows precisely what role her son had in this. And I am certain that she did this interview to protect him. I would put money on the fact that the Mounties definitely did a polygraph test with her and that they have interviewed her multiple times.
You know, if something bad happens, you get like your heart drops. Mine hasn't dropped. Deep down in my heart, I do believe Jack and Lily are alive. It's not because of what people are saying. It's my heart tells me that they are alive.
Okay, straight out, I'm going to call BS on that. I do need to mention her body language there because what I'm seeing there is she has raised her chin. That is a position of defiance. That is her saying, do not challenge me on this. While she's got her chin raised, you can see still a bit of that movement of the head shaking. It's harder to shake your head when you've got your chin raised, but you definitely see that movement occurring. But that's not the reason why I call BS on this. Now, it's not quite as apparent in this interview, but everything I've heard from this woman tells me that she really disliked Lily and Jack. To her, they were noisy and they were annoying. I also believe that she had very, very, very little to do with them on an everyday basis. And I'm basing that on something I came across this morning, basically, when I was editing photos, as I've mentioned. I will come back to that when I can find the accompanying audio, because that will show you precisely how much interaction this woman had with these children on a day-to-day basis. Her heart couldn't possibly be telling her if these children are alive or deceased, because she has no emotional connection to these children whatsoever. Everything I've heard from this woman screams the fact that she dislikes Malaya, and she did not like Lily and Jack either. And I'm going to stand by that. Honestly, I feel that the more people that come out who are so obviously lying, trying to push a narrative that supports Daniel and tries to make Malaya look like she is a guilty person here, that's having the opposite effect on me. What I'm seeing here is a really, really concerted campaign to basically put Malaya in the spotlight, to convince the public that it's all about Malaya, she's the bad person here. Don't look at Daniel, he's a good person. But the people who are doing this are lying. So to me that says that the person that we need to be looking at the most right now is definitely Daniel. In all honesty, if Daniel was even remotely intelligent, he would stop talking and he would stop having people coming out on his behalf and lying on his behalf. Because the more of these stories that come out, the worse it's making him look. So like I said, I haven't finished looking at Janie Mackenzie just yet. I have a rather long audio recording of her, which is definitely enlightening, and I think it's something that we need to look at. So I will be doing a video on that. I will also be producing a short sometime in the near future, which demonstrates pretty clearly that this woman had pretty much nothing to do with these children and knows very little about them. And finally, before I finish this video, I do want to highlight the fact that throughout this entire interview, not once did she plead for the help of the public in finding Lily and Jack or in finding out what happened to them. None of this interview was about Lily and Jack whatsoever. This interview was about Daniel. This interview was about Janie. That is all. She has no concern over the whereabouts of these children, which says to me either that she just doesn't care about the children or that she knows their whereabouts and she's forgotten that actually we're meant to be searching for them. I do believe, based on several things that she said in this interview, that those children are not on that property. I believe that they became not alive on that property and that somebody then removed them from that property and that they are somewhere nearby. And I know I haven't been quite as forward as this before, but I feel that now that Janie has come forward and shown us this, I feel more confident in saying these things. There's a lot more that I believe about this case based on the many, many interviews that I've listened to. Those are things that, some of which I have shared with my members, some of which I've only shared privately offline. I do believe that the people that are at the centre of this case lack the sophistication to continue to hide the truth, which is encouraging because that means that hopefully in the near future we will see justice for Lily and Jack. So on that note, thank you for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and leave a comment below because YouTube loves it when you do that, and that gets my videos out there into the algorithm. So thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.